Good morning, students. I hope you all are doing very well. And today we are going to do chapter number 9 of NCERT History Class 6, which is titled as Traders, Kings and Pilgrims. We are going to continue with chapter number with part 2. First part we have already done. Now, in the first part, in the previous part, we have covered traders and ancient trade, and we started with kings and ancient trade. Now, with the trade, we are going to talk about one very important trade in this part, plus the religion and the pilgrims. Now, everything has to be connected with the trade. Now, we are going to talk about very important route, which is the Silk Route. Now, before we start with that, we should understand what is Silk Route and what is silk basically. Now, and why were the kings, because this chapter is about trade. Now, why were the kings wanted to control these natural resources or the trading routes? Now, what was the reason? Why were they controlling it? Because this was making them rich and powerful because of the tribute and the gifts that they used to get out of these trading routes. Now, what is Silk Route? Now, this is what we are going to talk about now, and why this silk gained importance. Because what is silk? Now, today also you can see it very easily in your houses, but there was a time when it was actually very much valued because of the fabric, its color and the texture. Now, many of you must be knowing the process of making silk. It was actually very complicated. Now, a lot of people in the world know it. Our own country produces it now. Now, the raw silk has to be extracted from the cocoon of silkworm, which is further spun into thread and then woven into cloth. Now, which country invented the technique of making silk? So, it was China, which kept it as a big secret, the method of making silk. They kept it as a big secret for thousands of years. Now, people from China went on distant land from China on foot or on the horseback or on camels to different parts of the world, selling silk to the different parts. Now, the path that they followed from China reaching to other parts of the world came to be termed as Silk Route. Here you can read, this actually is the process which defines how the silk is produced. Now, this over here you can see, if this is China, the red part shows the land route reaching to different parts of the world, and over here it's the sea route reaching to different parts of the route, connecting different other regions of the world. Now, Silk Route get its name because of the Chinese precious lucrative silk trade along with it, okay, and the dynasty was Han Dynasty. Now, you can see like the geographical, this path had geographical limitation, climatic limitation, plus the acts of robbers also. Now, when the kings were controlling it, or they used to get tributes from the gifts or tributes from the traders, in return kings used to protect them from robbers, okay, from the attacks. So, this is one thing you need to understand. Now, what was the effect? So, suppose from here the silk and spices are going to this part, and from here metal and gems are coming to this part. So, what would be the effect? So, there will not be any large scale war between China and Persian Empire. Why? Because if your trading route, if your trade links are good, that means the people, large number of people in your country are getting occupation out of it. So, whenever the trade relations are good, the chances of having large scale wars between any two countries is very limited and minimum. Now, initially the Chinese ruler, they used to send silk to the rulers in Iran and West Asia, which led to the spread of knowledge of silk in the further west. Now, what happens even today, like suppose if there's a new product in the market, so what do the companies do? They either sell it at as a gift with some other product, okay, as a free gift with some other product, or they sell it at minimum price so that the knowledge about the product is spread. So that is why they used to give it as gift. The silk, Chinese would give silk as a gift to different rulers or the rich people in the Rome. And about 2000 years ago, the culture of wearing silk in Rome was very popular among rich people and the rulers. Now at that period, silk was very expensive, as it was brought from a very distant land via roads, mountains and desert, because I've told you the route had climatic changes, the geographical challenges also. Now again, I'm just repeating it so that you understand it better. So why were the kings trying to control large portion of this trade silk route? Because they could benefit from taxes or tributes and gifts that was brought by trades traveling along the routes. Okay, so in return, the kings protected these traders who were giving them money on these passes throughout the kingdoms from the attacks by the robbers. So I just repeat it for you to understand it better, because you have to connect each and everything with the trade in this chapter. Now over here in our country, Kushanas were the ruler who were controlling the Silk Road, and they had two important major center of powers. One was Peshawar, which is in present day Pakistan. The other was Mathura, and then Takshila also was part of their kingdom. Now they were the first among the first rulers to issue gold coins in the Silk Route. Okay, so during their rule, a branch of Silk Road also extended. Now, how did they control the Silk Road? They controlled Central Asia also, and down the seaports to the mouth of river Indus. Now, what is the mouth? Mouth is the part of the where it meets the sea. So that is the end of the river actually. Okay, and from where from the river Indus, it used to be shipped towards the Roman Empire. So this is how they used to take it. So there were three important major center of powers: Peshawar, Mathura and Takshila. This is the Kushana rulers. Now we start with the spread of the religion. You should understand how this is connected with trade. Now around 1900 years ago, there was a very famous Kushana ruler named Kanishk. Okay, so he organized a Buddhist council where different scholars used to meet and they would discuss important different matters. Now there was a very famous poet in his court. His name was Ashwaghosha, and he compiled a biography of Buddha, which is termed as Buddha Charitra. Now during this period, a new form of Buddhism came up, which was different from the earlier one. Now there were two different sects now, SECTS, sects of Buddhism. Now the new one was Mahayana Buddhism and the previous one was Heenan Buddhism. Now I'll tell you first before of Heenan. Now in the earlier one, what used to happen, that was not as a religion, that Heenan was not followed as a religion, it was followed as a teaching more, and there would be no idol worship. Like if they are showing Buddha, so the statue of Buddha will not be there, they would only depict the tree and not the Buddha. So there was no idol worship, and the text was written in Pali language. Okay, Buddha was followed as a human, as they thought that he was a man who found a way to nirvana. But in the new form in Mahayana Buddhism, there were two distinct features which were not present earlier. So one was statue of Buddha. In Mahayana Buddhism, they started following it more like a religion. So idol worship started because they started worshipping Buddha in form of statue. Text was now written in Sanskrit, like your karma, dharma, these words were used, and Buddha was considered and followed like a god, as he was eternal. Okay, so this was the two difference. Earlier the statues were not there, only signs used to be there. Okay, but the important thing about both the things were that both started and aimed at one important goal, which is the nirvana. Nirvana means the enlightenment. Okay, and though the both followed, the different sects followed different ways of achieving nirvana, but their ultimate goal was nirvana only, though the medium to reach was different. Okay, so again we find statues of Buddha in Mathura and in Takshila. Bodhisattva became a popular practice. Now what was this Bodhisattva? They were the person who attained enlightenment, and after enlightenment they would be complete isolation and meditate in peace. Okay, and they remained. Now earlier what used to happen, if in the previous one, if you are if you have attained enlightenment, so you would be away from the world. But in this, bodhisattva means you have attained enlightenment, but you are going to further help people with the enlightenment that you have achieved. You will remain in the world, you will teach people and help the people who are in problem to come out of their problem. Now in India, Buddhism was spread to western and eastern region, where dozens of caves were hollowed out for the monks, and they were converted into monasteries, so where the monks could live in. Now some of these caves were made on orders by the rich people, by merchants, farmers, king, queens, and they were located near the passes through the western ghats. So these were the roads that were connecting the ports on the coast near the cities in Deccan. So these so how is this connected with the trade? So because they were made near the passes. Now where the monks used to live, the traders also, when they are traveling, they would also they will halt in these caves in monasteries during their travel. So many times this also used to happen, that the monks also would travel with the traders, spreading the teachings of Buddhism. So like this, Buddhism also spread to southeastwards, to Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, other parts of Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. Now this is the older form of Buddhism, which is Theravada Buddhism. This was more popular in these areas. So this is how the Buddhism is related to the trade. Over here the Bhakti period started. Now in Bhakti period, this is not very difficult for you to understand. Now Bhakti means a person devotion to his or her chosen deity. So this idea became very popular. Okay, so this gained importance in Hinduism, the practice and worshipping Shiva, Vishnu, goddesses like Durga. Okay, now over here one important thing was that anyone, either he is rich or poor, high or low caste, whether he was a man or woman, they could follow it. There was no strict guidelines as earlier. Okay, so and it was also believed that if you pray to your God, he would appear to you in the any form. Okay, in any it could appear to you in human form or in tree form. So this was again a belief. Now in one of the sacred books of Hindus, which is Bhagavad Gita, the idea of bhakti is present. This is part of Mahabharata also. In this, the Krishna is the god, and he asked Arjuna, his devotee, to abandon all the dharmas and take refuge in him. So this type of worship was widely spread to other forms of the country. Now what does bhakti means? The origin of this word is from Sanskrit word bhaj, that means to divide or to share. Now there is a two-way relationship between God and the devotee, and bhakti directly takes you to Bhagavad, that means God, and it also possesses, and that also means the one who possesses bhag, or shares the fortune. Like if you are worshipping any god, he is the blessings of him, the fortune of the good fortune of that or the bliss of that deity will also be shared with you. Okay, so the system of bhakti emphasized devotion. There was individual worship of a god or goddesses. They were not performing sacrifices. This was again the new thing, which was different from the earlier beliefs of worshipping. Now the deity will appear, I just told you, it could appear in any form, in form of tree or human. Okay, it would appear to you, the deity would appear to you if the devotee is worshipping with the pure hearts. This beliefs are still existing in our time even today. Now when you are worshipping, you would be needing the image of the deity in its in the form of its statue. So because of this, art flourished, or the artisans came into being. Okay, so artists, they used to make very beautiful statues of the different gods. So images were kept in the special homes that we call them temples today. Now because we need deities, so that means the sculpture or the art flourished, the artist flourished, those who are making this different sculptures. Poetry flourished, and similarly architecture flourished because of the spread of bhakti. Now over here, this is Varaha avatar. This is the like Hindus believe that Lord Vishnu had its will have its 10th avatar. 9 he has already taken, 10th is yet to be taken. Okay, now over here it is the third one, which is called Varaha avatar, where a demon named Hiranyakashipu dragged the earth into the bottom of the sea, where Vishnu took the form of boar to protect the earth, and he rescues it, and they fought for 1,000 years. So this is again the bhakti period. Okay, so this is important, and this is how it is connected with trade also, because the sculpture flourished, the poetry flourished, and the architecture flourished. Now, who are the people who are pilgrims? Pilgrims are the men and women who undertake journey to holy places. Like, how are they different? They are traveling, but the people who travel to different holy places to spread the teaching of one particular religion in order to worship, okay, they are called pilgrims. Now, what is the link between traders and pilgrims? Because this chapter is actually about trade. So pilgrims, many times they travel with traders as they travel to distant lands. So this is how again they were spreading the teachings. They were traveling with traders, spreading the religion. Now there were very many pilgrims from China who came, and they came to our subcontinent, and they have written different texts, out of which we come to know about our subcontinent. Now when they visited this part of subcontinent, so they have written about their famous monasteries plus the journey that they have associated with. So when they are writing about their journey, they are writing about the different dangers that they encountered through the travels. Okay, they are talking about different countries, the monasteries, and the books that they carried with them. Now we have Zhuangzhang, the first one. So when he was returning back to China from our country, so he took back statues of Buddha made of gold, silver, and sandalwood, over 600 manuscripts which were on the backs of 20 horses. Now when he was traveling, his boat capsized in the river Indus. Capsized means it turned down. So 50 manuscripts were lost during this journey. But after this, when he was rescued and all the other things were rescued, so he spent rest of his life translating the remaining manuscript from Sanskrit language to the Chinese one. So we have the teachings of Buddha converted from Sanskrit to Chinese by him. So now we are talking about Faxian. This was again a Chinese pilgrim. When he was returning back to the China from Bengal, he was boarded in a ship, and which barely traveled. After his bare travel for 2 days, they caught in the storm, and all the merchants just started throwing all the different loads that could save the ship from sinking to reduce the weight of the ship. Now, but everybody was throwing, but he's also threw his personal belongings, but he did not throw the books and the statue of Buddha that he had collected from here. So the storm subsided for 13 days, and that this is how he describes the storm, that it was impossible to know east or west and except by observing the sun. So they were stuck in this, but it took him 90 days to reach Java. But this is very important question that arises, that he threw everything, all important personal belongings, but he still clung to the statue of Buddha and the books that he belonged. So that means they were so precious to him. And other Chinese pilgrims also, the Buddhist teaching and the statue of Buddha, they were so impressed by the teachings. Now Zhuangzhang, the other pilgrim, also he talks about Nalanda, which is in present day Bihar, which is a very famous Buddhist monastery of that period. And this is how he describes it, that if the people want to study there, they would find a gatekeeper who would ask them different questions to enter inside it. It was so difficult to get entry as a student in Nalanda also. So out of 10 people, only 7 to 8 people were not able to answer the question that were asked by the gatekeeper. So this is how they describes it. Thank you for watching. Do share if you liked it and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.